Hello everybody, I'm Andrea Escalante. Morning. Well, I'm not the first lesbian police officer at the Oxnard Police Department, although I may be the first UU. In my work with the public, I often encounter the stereotype that all women police officers are either lesbian or married to a male officer. When I was a new patrol officer, the most intimidating version went as follows. I had a drunk male suspect. He would ask if I was single. When I answered that I was married, he would then ask if my husband worked at the Oxnard Police Department or the Sheriff's Department. The fact that I could be married to a woman or a non-law enforcement officer was never even a consideration. But it was always better just to let him think what he wanted to, so he could endure the humiliation of being arrested by a woman. After I proved my street worth by making a lot of DUI, narcotics, and warrant arrests, I started to take more time on my calls with real victims and their families. I still have a square sticker of a rainbow unicorn, you'll see on the next slide, in my locker. That was given to me in the late 1990s by a 5-year-old boy who I met at his front door when he was armed with a fireplace poker. He said he was never letting his mother's boyfriend back into their home again. This was after the man had pushed his mother to the floor and kicked her in the stomach right in front of the boy and his baby sister. The boy called 911 and armed himself to protect his family until my arrival. At the end of the contact, we traded my police badge sticker for his unicorn sticker. Children like this little boy were the real reason I went into law enforcement. I wanted to speak for those who couldn't, because they were pushed into the silence of secrecy, fear, and shame. I wanted to give voice and the power of justice to those who were violated and stripped of their human dignity. I wanted to hear their cries for help and respond with compassion and action. I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to be a hero. And while I made that boy and his family feel safe when I was there that day, I always wondered what would happen after I left and the bad guy returned. It wasn't until the early 2000s that the crime of domestic violence was truly being taken seriously for the first time in the criminal justice system. Emergency protective orders and the enforcement of crimes such as child and elder abuse became mandates, along with increased victim advocacy and support resources. My career witnessed the implementation of Amber Alert and now Silver Alert, because society has moved in the direction of protecting our most vulnerable members, our children, our elders, by starting with the insistence that family problems not be resolved with violence, isolation, and threats. For the past 9 years, I've been dedicated as a detective to investigating those very types of crimes. I can't tell you how many times I heard heartbreaking details of child sexual abuse, or attended an autopsy of a beaten and battered infant, or watched an Alzheimer's patient be placed in a sterile facility without even photos of her family because a caretaker sold her home and disposed of all her possessions. Every one of those victims and survivors transformed me in some way or another. People often ask me how I handle hearing and seeing such traumatic things. Here is the way I have learned to find some perspective. I tell myself this: those are not my experiences. That is not my life. Sometimes other people's problems actually make my life seem not so bad. What I see, hear, and know, when I hear, see, and know that a bad thing has happened to somebody, I actually get to go do something about it. I don't have to sit with it and do the hard work of surviving it. I have a role to play that I could never experience without those brave and courageous victims to come forward and speak their truths. They are my heroes, and I am so grateful because I never had any real heroes before. Now I never dare to think of myself as a hero. A hero to me is a 16-year-old sexually confused boy who decided not to kill himself because it made more sense to him to tell me about his predatory godfather and stop the man from abusing other preteen boys. I've had the privilege of showing many a child victim how powerful they actually were because they overcame their own shame, embarrassment, confusion, and fears to speak out and prevent another victim from suffering in silence. Speaking of children, during my career, my daughter came along, and that provided another level of my transformation. I was the first lesbian officer at my agency to have a child and take a full family leave. Only 2 years later, I was working patrol when toddler Abigail was ill at home and she suffered a febrile seizure. Since we lived in Oxnard, I raced home with my lights and siren on, panicking when I beat the firefighters and paramedics to my driveway. Thank goodness they were right behind me. As I held the front door open for them to rush to Abigail's aid, they asked, why was I, a patrol officer, on this medical assist call? When the fire captain finally understood that it was my child in distress, he and my patrol sergeant, who had just arrived, held me up by my shoulders as my knees buckled under me. There was no hesitation on anybody's part about my child having 2 mothers, and I felt like an accepted member of the public safety family. As my daughter grew into a school-aged child, and I was working the sexual assault child abuse unit, on call 24 hours a day, leaving home in the midst of birthdays, holidays, and even soccer playoff games, I knew that my answer of leaving to help another child escape the bad guys just wasn't good enough anymore. It was time for me to find a different assignment. My detective sergeant was there with me the night that Abigail's mother ended her relationship with me. And my same supervisor was there as I struggled through learning how to be a single parent. She supported my decision to move to the financial crimes position so that I could stop being on call and have a flexible work schedule. One of my chiefs marched in full uniform in the San Francisco Pride Parade this June with his son. And now he checks on how things are going with me and my daughter on a regular basis. I have learned that just by being myself, I'm giving permission to those around me to be comfortable in their own skin and with their own struggles. I was recently asked by my command staff to become the first ever LGBTQ liaison officer and create a training program for our agency. I feel humbled that I've had the opportunity in my career to be transformed by those true heroes who are brave enough to stand up against injustice and oppression in their own lives. And I also feel proud that I've had the opportunity to transform my little corner of law enforcement just by being myself, a transformed hero.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Anahi Quiroz, and I stood in front of the congregation 5 years ago after Obama announced deferred action for child arrivals. This was June 15, 2012. We had a community forum where we talked about immigrant children pursuing the American dream. And I told you about how hard my life had been because I didn't have a social security number. And now, after Obama's announcement, since I had been in the country since before I was 16, and I had a high school diploma, in fact I had a bachelor's degree, and I had a clean criminal record, I was eligible to apply for this work permit. My mom cried when she saw my social security number. My mind was very unsettled because I had been contributing to all these different nonprofits, immigrant rights, social justice, I trained to be a peer educator for Planned Parenthood, I was being of use to all these different nonprofits without being paid. And I had a job at a restaurant that paid my bills, and life was going well, in my opinion. I just couldn't go apply to get a real job. And I was in no hurry when that opportunity came, because I could pay my bills and I was involved in the community. And my cynical self thought that Obama passed this executive order to take us out of the activism because we were being effective. Eventually, I knew that it was time for me to take advantage of this work permit. And I applied to state publications, and I almost get the job, but I didn't have any experience, so they weren't going to take any chances. And then I had 4 jobs in January of 2015 when I first had that permit, and it was that feeling of being able to go into any company and being able to apply to any job that they had was a feeling that I had never had before. But now I could. So I applied to that dream company that I had, Sage Publications. But then the opportunity came to work for the Social Justice Fund, because the administrative assistant had just quit, and there was no other person better than me to take that job, because I had been contributing my free time for 3 years. So I did that for 6 months, and when it was time for me to really look for a job, I started sending my resume to different places that I found on Craigslist. I decided I was going to send 5 resumes every day until I found a job. And I got called immediately. I have a bachelor's degree. My resume was really strong because of all the involvement I have in nonprofits. I was bilingual. And I got called in to work at Registry Monitoring Insurance Services. We monitor insurance for transportation brokers. This means that we create registrations for truck drivers that are going to get jobs with the brokers. One of our clients handles the account for Trader Joe's. And after working at RMIS for 2 years, I recently got a promotion, and now I'm responsible for special accounts, and I'm responsible for Trader Joe's accounts. And that means something to all of us because we're supporters of Trader Joe's, and that means that if that truck driver doesn't have the right insurance, they're not allowed to work for Trader Joe's. We provide a little bit of oversight to a very unregulated industry. And I also found a family. My colleagues, we work together every day. If one of us gives the wrong information to someone, instead of like telling on each other, we help each other out, and we're like, I'm sorry they said that, but this is actually how it goes. And it creates camaraderie between us. I can trust my colleagues. I have good benefits. And I can say that every morning I get up and I love going to work, especially because of my colleagues. Our job is very challenging because a lot of the truck drivers are not very well educated and they don't know how to use computers. So sometimes they can't get through our online registration easily. So our job is to help them get through it. And we need to remind ourselves to use compassionate language. And I can go back to my old self who was 17 and didn't know how to use computers. I remember when I didn't understand the World Wide Web, where something would disappear and then I would think, where did it go? Now, I believe that President Obama gave us the deferred action because he thought that maybe that was the best thing that he could do 5 years ago. And the conversations about immigration reform had pretty much stopped. And now it's like, now we need to protect DACA. But now I think he did it so that maybe he knew that later on there was going to be a stronger fight that was going to be needed for immigration reform. And maybe he wanted us to be better prepared. Because now, my full-time job, I work 40 hours a week. I have vacation time. I have sick time. The company has showed that they're committed to me, so now I can feel that I'll probably be around with them for at least 3 more years, just because it fits within the bigger plan, which is me pursuing a law degree, but right now this works. But I think that with all the free time that I have, if deferred action were taken away, I would have all this free time to be able to fight so that it's not taken away. But the reality is that our document does say until it expires or until the program is terminated. So the possibility of that taken away is there. That being said, I will always go back to my education is something that is with me and nobody can take it away from me. And me being bilingual and being someone that believes that I can easily learn another language, I know that I can probably go work in Canada, in Quebec, and find a new life for myself. So I'm really not scared, but the reality is that, and I know God would not give me anything that I can't handle. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm Jason Hall. I've been a member for, I think, around 3 years or so, and it's pretty exciting. I've started getting more involved in different things. And it took me some time to start getting more involved, to really decide whether I was willing to really, truly commit. And anyone here that knows my wife knows pretty well that she showed me how important it was to get involved. And there's no doubt that it's paid off. One of the reasons why it took me some time to really emotionally commit is for years and years I worked a job that paid a great income, but I really felt no value to it. I didn't feel like it was purposeful work or that was really meaningful at all. And I can tell you that when you hear the fact that I write about stocks and Wall Street, you're probably, a lot of you are experiencing a little confusion right now. How is that meaningful, right? I mean, Wall Street is this corrupt thing, right? It's like the epitome of so many things that we think are wrong with society, and that we have this narrow group that controls so much of the vast wealth of this country, right? And there's absolutely truth to that. However, we live in a capitalist society, and that's a good thing. There are problems with it because we do have real wealth inequity. But if you look at China, for example, you have huge wealth inequity there as well, and it's a communist country. So wealth inequity isn't part and parcel of a capitalist or a communist society. The difference is that in a capitalist society, we have the ability to vote with our wallets in a way that can really create change in this world. It's also something that is important to how we build our personal wealth and how we are able to support our families, and gives us a power that so many people around the world just simply don't have access to. So if you think about, for example, what happened last November, if we depend on our government to do all of the big things, all of the important things, every 4 years we risk completely halting any ability to have any progress in our society whatsoever, right? That's terrifying. But when you invest, when you buy stock in a company, you're supporting that company's good. And that's so incredibly powerful. So if you think about, for instance, when President Trump announced that he was pulling the United States out of the Paris Climate Accords, if you look at the response across the private sector, any CEO of any large company that spoke up on the issue was unequivocal that his company was going to continue to pursue their reduce carbon emissions policies. They were going to continue to support those things, that climate change is a real issue, and their companies were going to continue to do that. And you know why they did that? Generally for 3 reasons. Number one, it's good business, right? That's really important. Number two, they have customers and they have shareholders. Money talks, right? So that's hugely, hugely important. Now, there's another thing. There's a potential retirement crisis brewing in the United States. You know, right now there are around, on average, about 3 million Americans reach retirement age every year, and this is going to continue until around 2030, and then it's going to decline a little bit when my generation, which is a little less populous than the baby boomers, starts retiring. But this is very, very important, because the median, which is the number that sits dead in the middle where half are above and half are below, the median person that's reaching retirement age right now has about $150,000 saved for retirement. That might sound like, well, that's a pretty good sum of money. Here's the reality. The average person that's 65 today is going to live past 80. $150,000, that's about $500 a month is what that's really worth in sustainable income, right? So here's where the meaningful part comes in. I've thrown all these kind of weird, some kind of scary things here. But I write. I'm a writer. That's what I get to do. I write about personal finance topics. I write about stocks. I don't write about short percentages and moving averages and bearish momentum and all that jargon and babble that doesn't mean a thing to anybody in this room. I write about the companies, the businesses themselves. For example, First Solar, a company that's been making solar panels for almost 30 years and has been profitable every single year that they've been in business. Tesla Motors, Google, a company that has taken something that used to be the purview of people that had wealth and had access to places where the information was, and they basically made near instantaneous access to information a commodity, right, that anybody has access to. Of course, there's goods and bads there, right? There's things that aren't necessarily great about it, because online you can find a lie that supports your crazy belief just as quickly as you can find the truth. But in general, it has made society better, and it has opened things up. So again, if the political party whose policies and views you don't believe are making all of these decisions, and that's who gets put into office, it halts all momentum. By investing, you have the ability to affect that. So I get to write about the companies. I get to talk about the things that the companies are doing. I also write a lot about some of the financial issues. So the retirement savings, really it's almost a crisis, you could say. Giving information to help people make better decisions so that they can fully participate in our society. And going to your voting booth every 4 years, that's important. Giving your time and your money to the organizations that you support, that's important. But the vast majority of our economy, the car that you drove here in, the company that powers that provides the electricity that powers this facility, the companies, the jobs that most of you will go to Tuesday morning, those are for-profit enterprises. And your ability to influence how the world looks is based on that. So I get to write about that. I get to share information to help people make better decisions about when they vote with their wallets, when they invest their retirement savings. And I can think of few things that are more meaningful than to help people make those decisions. Here's a little thing that I share a lot. You want $1 million? You want to make $1 million? You want to retire a millionaire? $500 invested in the stock market every month for 40 years, you'll retire with a couple $1 million. $500 a month. Most people don't do that because the industry has done such a good job of controlling the information and creating that jargon, and you feel like you have to go sit down and meet with an advisor who, by the way, most of these advisors they're salespeople. That's what most of them are. They're not held to a fiduciary standard where they have to act in your best interest. They can actually recommend a product to you that simply because they get paid a higher commission on it. Even if they know there's a better product, an investment product, they'll get a lower commission but will give you better returns. It's legal for them to do that. So I will say this, we have a gentleman named Dave Buss who's a member of our congregation. He's a fiduciary standard and a great guy. So if you want good advice, I'm going to tell you right now, there's somebody in this congregation who has ethics and integrity. Most of the people in the industry, they don't, but I get to write about the real stuff, and it's not about me selling anybody a specific product that I'm going to get a commission on. So that's a great thing. Now, the company that I write for is called The Motley Fool. So some of you may have heard of that. I heard some ahs there. So it's, I actually started out as a reader of The Motley Fool about 10 years ago, and it's an organization that had a major influence on me, and opened my eyes to how to invest better. The Motley Fool, the name actually comes from Shakespeare play, As You Do It. And those of us that are avid supporters and employees and writers that work for the Motley Fool, we call ourselves fools with a capital F. And it's at least in part to thumb our nose at the greater industry, because the entire mission of the organization is to help people invest better. That's it. And so I walked away from a great job that I felt very little value and meaning in, and I found something that, and this is crazy, right? I went to work in the financial services industry for a significant pay cut. Who does that? Who goes to work in the finance industry for a pay cut? But I did that simply because it's an opportunity for me to find meaning and to help people do better with their money. And I can think of fewer things that most people could use some type of help with. So if you really want to make the world look like the world that you want to be, keep voting. Keep talking about the things that are important to you, to people around you, to influence them. Keep volunteering of your time to the charitable organizations you support. Keep giving your money to those organizations. Keep giving money to CVUUF. But just as importantly, when your time to retire comes, when your time to help support your kids pay for their college education comes, the way you're going to accomplish those goals is by investing, whether it's in your 401k fund, your 401k at work, through the mutual funds, or whether you have a college savings account for your kid that you're buying stocks in or you're buying funds in. You're voting with that money too. One of the best ways to make the world look like the world you want to be is to invest it in the companies that do the things that make this world look like you want to be. And I'm blessed that I get to help people do those things every day and write about these issues. So, thank you.
Good morning. My name is Andrea Steffan. Several months ago, when I agreed to speak today, I thought the theme of the service was transformation. And I readily agreed because I've had to do a lot of work in my life to transform things, my relationship to myself, to people, jobs, being well. So a few weeks ago, when I found out the monthly theme for September was transformation, and the theme for today is work that is real, I could feel my guts clench and my heart start to pound. All I could think was, I used to do work that's real, but I don't anymore. And I agreed to speak. What will I say? I used to be a high school English teacher in East Los Angeles, and then I became an assistant principal and a principal in charter schools in South LA and Highland Park. But I burned out and left the field entirely. When I left, I had no idea what to do next. I'd spent years and thousands training myself to do this one thing, and suddenly, all I wanted was anything but that. So I decided to give myself a year to decompress and try to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. I need a year to recover with something my friends and family could understand. So I decided to just take a job that didn't involve stress or working 7 days a week or taking work home or 16-hour days. But midway through that year, no, 3/4 of the way through that year, I was still working peripherally in education and had no idea what to do next. Educational hiring season had started, and just about everyone in my life kept telling me, "You had your year, get back in the game." But I couldn't. Something in me just knew not to. So I didn't apply or interview, and in those quiet moments, I could feel the panic seeping in. But one afternoon, a former teacher of mine, who had also left the field of education and was working as a legal secretary, called me and said this attorney on his floor needs a paralegal and I should go and interview. "I don't even know what a paralegal is," I responded, because I didn't. But my friend insisted that this is a job that I would be good at, and this attorney was great, and it would all work out. And I trust this friend. So I did. I figured, it's fine. I'll take 2 years to figure my life out. It's fine. And maybe if I work in a truly different field, it might be a little bit easier to figure things out. It was. So I started working for my boss, and I fell in love with the work. We do civil litigation defense, and I primarily work on personal injury claims. And so, in the interest of complete honesty, it's another reason I was a little hesitant to share about my job today, because it sounds terrible. We defend insurance companies and the companies they insure against people who are claiming they were injured by the company in some way. Terrible. And so not you. But I love it. I love it. We represent landscapers, bars, hospitals, insurance companies, and rehab treatment facilities against people who claim these companies have injured them. I investigate and analyze evidence and testimony and medical records to make sure that no plaintiff gets any money for an injury they don't have or we didn't cause. See? Terrible. But it's really a lot of fun, and I love doing it. For example, one of our plaintiff's entire claim was a fraud, and I was able to prove it, and this plaintiff got no money, which makes me so happy. So less than a year after I started to work for my boss, I found myself taking the LSAT, and last year I started law school. I work all day, and I go to school at night, and I am exhausted all the time. My to-do list feels endless, and like every job, there's things about my job that I hate. But do I do work that's real? A few weeks ago, I would have told you, no. I don't do work that's real because my work doesn't make a difference in the world, at least not the way being a school principal did, or the work Erica does. But in the past few weeks, I've had to transform my relationship for what it means for work to be real. I realized I had a very old framework for what that means. I love the work that I do. I love finding all the little pieces of a claim. I love putting things together within the rules. I love debating the merits of an argument. I love winning. So, no, I'm not doing work in service of the community the way that I used to. But I am doing work that's real. I do work that enlivens and engages me. And that feeling of joy and elation and fun that I have when I figure something out or when we litigate a claim well and win, that's how I know I'm doing work that is real.